Well, I don't know what to say. I've had the pleasure of working on this campus in a past life. So CCSR and the Clark Center, seeing it so many years later is pretty a treat. And to see many of the colleagues I got to collaborate with here, even though I was the peon in the room, to see them here tonight. And Kathy, she's basically family. I've known her for a long time. So I'm very, very excited, especially getting this opportunity to talk to you about this. And I think the funny thing about the topic of uncertainty sort of took me back a little bit. So like, what does that mean? And as you've read farther along in the text, it started to make sense to me that, you know, when you do the work that we do as designers, you don't necessarily have full control over a situation, or you probably want to. But it is funny how people engage with what you create. And that's why I think what we're always interested in is the creating that moment that makes you think, makes people engage with the landscape rather than just walking through it at a million miles an hour or very slowly. This image here, as soon as I heard basically you never know what's going to happen to your landscapes, this one jumped out as this is, I don't know, not many people may know this magazine, but it's Thrasher magazine. That is not a doctored image. That is a skater that is flying off one of our landscape elements and over the Pier Point Lane sign. You can get a t-shirt and a mug of this image. So I thought immediately, this is definitely what we need to show, because I think this is what people are after, because really you can't, sometimes it's really hard to program. You think things are going to go your way or away, and it's not there. But to start off, this is where we live. This is SurfaceDesign. We're in Pier 33 in San Francisco. So we're neighbors. And this is the office itself. It's an old fire person's thing. They used to have the boats below, and you slid down a pole, and they lived up here. And then this is myself and my partner, Roderick Wiley. So we founded SurfaceDesign in 2006. And so I guess we're on 20 years now, which is really frightening because it seems like yesterday. One of the first projects that we were commissioned and talk about no expectations was the Museum of Steel in Monterrey, Mexico. The architect was Nicholas Grimshaw out of London, and they hired us, Claudia Harari, who is a friend of mine, who's a landscape architect down there, for this project. But in Mexico, they don't really have the landscape architecture profession at all. And only recently is it really becomes an identity, but back then it was really not there. So when you don't have a profession and you have to sort of convince the client to be hired, and then you get hired and then there's no budget because they didn't know what landscape is. So it led for that really interesting time, because you're sitting in this amazing city. This is their industrial north. You know, all Mexican Coke comes from here. So it's really an amazing place. And the land itself was really known as the industrial capital for Mexico, and the steel industry was a major portion of this. So the steel plant itself, this is what it looks like here. Of course, you can see how things get transformed over time. You can see the steel plant is that rusty thing right down at the end there. But the road you're seeing around there is because they're into Formula One racing. So they immediately converted it to a racetrack. But other things is how to convert these buildings. And so this was the steel plant itself. As it started, there's the main hall, this elevator, and you see the train tracks at the bottom where raw material will be brought in, processed, and then poured out the back. And we really wanted to tap into because this is a really honoring the makers themselves, the processes that happened on this site, and really that memory. And so this is what it looked like when we got here. What was also really sort of fascinating about this place was that you had this very esteemed architect converting it to a museum. And then what they thought about was to preserve the hall, not like that, but almost like that, and think about the museum actually going underground. So all these lumps and bumps you see everywhere, it was really an outtake of the process that had happened in this furnace here when we arrived. Sometimes you had a good pour, sometimes you didn't. So you poured it out the back, but it would come through this runnel out the hot molten steel, and then would be formed. And so this is what you saw, and this is part of the process. So as I mentioned, they don't even know what landscape architects are, so there was certainly no budget. And so this one I call the ultimate sustainable project, because literally anything they dug up to do their museum underground, we would take and reuse. And because there were so many mishaps and elements that we could reuse, it became sort of fun. So this is the finished product, and the green roof, the saddle's right there. But this is what we were after. So as they dug down for this building, we discovered things. And so these are some of the these are the containment structures for the raw material that came in off the trains. And we literally looked at how can we actually reuse this material and everything that was contained in it. So it had this wonderful patina over the years where the raw material had actually fused to the containers. So we thought we'd reuse that as the containment for the museum itself, so you can see the fence line there. And then juxtaposing that with the actual finished product that you see up above. So that contrast between the beautiful finite end result and the process that made it, including, this is the first ever garden treatment for stormwater in Mexico. But you can see the kind of fusing of that raw material and what it makes. Really wanted to talk about, and this thing, believe it or not, is a giant volume of steel. So like, you know, in the 70s, we used to make those crazy, maybe I made in the 70s, I'm aging myself, but you go in the backyard in the sand pit, you dig it and you pour the wax in, and all of a sudden you got these great candles. Well, this is basically what it was, but with raw steel. So rather than even attempting at moving it, we actually incorporated it within the landscape and other elements that were part of the different blast furnaces that had missed on. And framing devices to highlight the elevator itself was converted for people, so people can go up to the top and have a look down. And all these elements, rather than throwing them out, we incorporated them in. Even down to the materials, these are experiments we did where we used the crushed concrete and repurposed it and to make new concrete so that it had another life to it. And the fire brick from the old blast furnaces, to reuse that, is paving. And then here's, you see the elevator going up. And this gesture here, the steel water feature that's about 200 meters long, it goes the other way too, is literally where the train tracks used to come in. And so we did this optical effect of creating a water feature where it looks like it's falling or moving the opposite direction that you think it's moving with the light and the water forces. And we did that. This is the unexpected portions of how you communicate when you're in San Francisco and you're building something in Monterrey, Mexico. So we would do these little sketches and go back and forth, faxing them and conveying the design intent to create that thing. And then elements we discover, like the raw material, you know, let's save it. So they why would you want this? And they're like, well, because we have nothing and we want to do something. And so so this is the end result with this water feature. Always laugh, Enrique Norton, an architect in Mexico City, that's a friend. He always called his architecture low-tech architecture, and he said he used to do it by drilling holes to make perforated. Well, I go, this is low-tech landscape. So we use irrigation lines to create the misters that go in between the rocks. So you get this notion that it could be hot rocks, which is what you would expect in this kind of environment, but it's actually cool rocks. So it's like an outdoor air conditioning, but it gives the flavor of what the sentiment of what the place was doing when it was live. And it's a great place for kids to play and engage with. They have sort of fun doing it. But all the material you're seeing, from the pavement to the rocks to the steel panels, were literally from the old plant. So these, you can see there the repurposed steel from the face of the cladding, and that sort of optical illusion that the water is moving in what direction, as you see here. And from above, you can start to see how it all fits together, those elements, and welcoming you to the museum as you come through. And then we created the largest green roof in Latin America. And how did we do it? The architects thought, well, let's just fill it full of dirt and put trees on it, and that would be sort of cool. And we said, well, you don't have the depth to grow trees, and if you can even find trees in Mexico, because they don't really grow, they don't have nurseries. At least at that, they do now, but not at that period. So we literally had to think about how to create something and celebrate this wonderful roof, because they just wanted it mounted over. And we says, well, you got this beautiful structure below, let's bring it to the surface and use the forms that you're doing and reflection on the top as well. So this is the process of making that green roof, from the insulation to the pond liner for waterproofing. Again, everything's sort of low tech, and you can see the way it was made. And then it's covered with lightweight soil, and then we shaped it into the forms that were below but on the roof, sending sketches like this back and forth, and then thinking about how you keep something like this alive. So we started with sedums, so 3 different types of sedums, and we planted them. Here they are planted. You can see the scale of a person, and you get to understand how big this giant roof was. But they planted them, and other than the initial just watering by hand to start them off, this is a completely non-irrigated roof. So this is they're now framing where people walk and look, and you can start to see the end results. The folds, we then used rock so you can access them for maintenance. And there's the roof finished. So 3 different, this is completely non-irrigated, and I can attest, as of up to last week, it's still intact and it has not gone crazy. It's actually, you can understand the steel forms, and then what we wanted to do, rather than having the trees like the architects, sometimes you have to push back on architects, but was that we love the datum they created with the architecture, that metal edge, because then you look at the mountains, the Sierras, and you can appreciate the beauty of the natural forms next to the architecture. Because sometimes you have too many busy things, you can't see the forest from the trees. So this time we said no forest, no trees, sedum. And this is what it looks like. And we've seen, and it's completely self-sustaining. Underneath all this craziness, the architects did go crazy, so we have to go ahead. With lighting up the blast furnace that you saw previously, this is the new alignment. There's a whole sound and light thing that goes to it. And then these are just elements of how the second green roof that we created, the live green, is with grasses. Again, these were really difficult to source because literally no one had a nursery to do this stuff, but it was fun. You can see how it's just determination here and at night. The second crazy project I thought about with uncertainty is this is at a Piers 9 in San Francisco. And has anyone ever dealt with the Port of San Francisco? It's crazy. So they had a historic person or whatever, and they told us that this is we're doing a temporary landscape for Autodesk, because they had a workshop here and they wanted to illustrate what they could do. So before we'd done anything, we got there and they told us that that was historic asphalt and we couldn't touch it. And we're like, okay, historic asphalt, you can't touch, not even paint, nope, nothing. So like clearly they didn't want anything to go on here. So sometimes you have to outsmart the foxes and you have to think, well, what's so historical about this asphalt? What's it hiding? What's it under? And so that gave us the inspiration for the project. This is where it sits. And it sits right there and it's right on the water. So, well, what's underneath this thing? And this is where it sits. Barnacles. So we took the notion that maybe what we could do was create giant barnacles and illustrate what is going on underneath this historic asphalt, and understand that there are natural living organisms that are in the sea, and they have a really beautiful form and structure, and really analyzing them, how they aggregate together and they create space and make places, so that we could extract one and then think about how to place them on top of the historic asphalt and not touch the historic asphalt. And then we could move them anytime the port decided they wanted to do it. And so we created these crazy diagrams for how you can move around them. Yeah, and they said, no, you can't even paint, so don't even try it. So we didn't. But we created these things. And what's interesting, we were working with Autodesk. And so Autodesk was getting into 3D printing. And this is a little bit time back. And so we were really interested in incorporating their technologies and what they're all about. So we did a paper model, and then we did a 3D printed, and then we did a cast model of them and how they could be all broken apart, because again, nothing can be permanent. So we did these series of drawings and the abstraction of the barnacle for people to sit in. You can even see the ADA armrest there, so everyone can incorporate that. But we also had weight. Weight was a big issue here. You can't literally put a giant concrete barnacle here and probably fall through this historic asphalt. So we had to literally think about using ductile concrete, latest technology with Mark Ruggiero from Concrete Works. It was a dear friend of ours. So we really said, well, let's push the technology. How can we do this? So literally the 3D printing, so the texture on the barnacles is literally the tool movement of shaping the formwork that created the elements. And those bigger cuts are for our favorite friends on skateboards, air quotes, so they won't run over them, although that's the first thing that ever happened. But here's the process of building them. So we created these formworks out of wood. You can see the tool channeled panels, and then it was created into these larger forms, upside down, and then filled with the ductile concrete. So this is really strong, indestructible. It's about an inch thick, and it's applied. And here you start to see the pieces already made and in the yard to be fabricated, and here they are. So they've come out, and again, the unexpected thing that happened was the kids love them, because this is right next to the Exploratorium. So the buses drop off and they inundate, and they just can't have enough of these things. My favorite story is that the X Games were in San Francisco, and you can try everything. They keep a BMX bike, literally used them to launch themselves over the edge and into the bay. So not expected, didn't think that was going to be any helpful, but elements that did go into the element that we wanted a tactile quality for people that we are very interested in working with people with disabilities. So most of all our paths or everything we use or do is universal accessibility. But in this case, because everything was flat, because it's asphalt, we created these bronze elements that you could tactile, that you could come up and read the story and feel the barnacles that are going on. And that led us to, I don't know about shells these days. This is Land's End in San Francisco. And this is a spot that was for the NPS. And it sits right, there's a Cliff House right there, Mount Sutro. And then this is the parking lot was there, but the visitor center was not. You can see the Sutro Baths ruins at the bottom. And this is what the Sutro Baths like. So I always laugh because the architects love this image, because there's been so many competitions on to rebuild the Sutro Baths. And we're like, well, we're going to incorporate them. But what we were more interested in is the interface between the brackish water and the seawater, and all those plant materials that you're seeing growing along the edge, because it is an incredibly powerful site. The wind, everything, you literally will get blown off your feet. So how do you create a landscape that is occupiable and creates things, and work with an architect that was trying everything they could, but it sort of needed a collaboration with a landscape architect to actually make it work. And we also are scavengers. We're hooker by crook kind of landscape architects. So we found out there was a secret basement hidden in the Presidio that had all these objects and art pieces from the Sutro Park. And so we decided we want those. We also are really, and I'll mention this probably 1,000 times, but strangely enough, we're landscape architects that like plants, which when you meet a lot of architects, they don't like plants, but they like hardscape, but we like plants. And so for us, it was really interesting to think about sourcing all the material from the watershed that is around the site. So literally we collected all these seeds, and volunteers came out and collected the seeds. We documented them. We grew them in a nursery in the Presidio. And then it came to this. So because we sort of helped the architect out, all of a sudden our budget went from X to 0. And so we had, again, to be in that same hooker by crook environment. But we had certain specificities that we needed to meet, and one is the sand. So in order to grow the plants that we're pulling from this watershed, you needed a unique sand mix. So literally, I had a guy in my office, I used to call him Sandman, because we literally called every construction site that was going on in San Francisco and begged the contractor, could we have your sand, and would you deliver it to the ends of the earth? And we found this one. If you're in San Francisco, it's that black tower called NEFA or something like that, where we conned them into doing this for us. It was really kind because we got our soil, and this is the result. So these are the species that are native to this watershed and incorporated them. There's the architecture that we helped out, so you get views out to the ocean rather than blocking them off. And then the gesture of the architecture comes out and creates these sort of wood elements that create the microclimate to contain the soil and actually protect the plants, but also collect more plants, because a lot of the plants are wind born. So if you create something, you can create this landscape here that out of nothing, because we had nothing. And this is how you do it. So you put the spikes of the wood planks in, it creates the dunes themselves, and then the seed drops out, and then you have the form. So here's the manufacturing of it. The wood material literally had to come from the site because we didn't have any money for the wood either. But we did find out in the Presidio that they had a bunch of macrocarpus that they had taken down. So those are those trees you see in the back. And we literally repurposed them to create the stakes and also the seating. So it's very robust. And so you can see the tree, and then we also conned one of the contractor guys to mill the wood for us so that we could create this ADA acceptable seating. Of course, a bird sits on it, but that's how you know you're successful. But with the handicap arm rail, everything was working pretty well. What we did was really interesting about this is when we actually planted the plants, you've probably seen them around campus, those little flags, for irrigation. They're all, and sometimes you have to figure out if you got it right. So literally we put flags all behind here where to plant the right plants. And the usual windstorm came by, and it was amazing to watch all the flags that have been created between the earth form and the way we located this building. It was completely calm. And you step 1 foot out and you're blown off the cliff. So it was really interesting to see how shaping space really does impact the microclimates that you're in. And we have the stag that we stole next away. And then materials you see, this was where all the oyster shacks used to be. So literally we harvested all the remnants of the oysters and used them as mulch for the planting. And then created these views out and planting to the, so you can get really blast away. And then this was our first introduction to the internet. So we kept getting, everyone kept on saying, all these people are posting about this thing. So we were like, oh, yes, this is another way of thinking about how people are engaging with your site, even though it's virtual. And that's, again, where we resourced all the plants. This is Expedia. It's a different story. This is up in Seattle. This is a 42-acre campus for Expedia Inc. And so this was another adventure because there really was no site to start with. This is the site before, which is water. And then the train tracks came across, and then they kept filling it in. So this is in plan. You see the red line is really what the site was. So understanding, again, the complexities of building on something that wasn't there is really important. So you think about, this is originally, it was the Amgen campus, and the situations of property ownership, you can see that corner T, that was the public trail, and literally it was 9 degrees at the corner. There were so many accidents of runners and bikers at that point, it was sort of ridiculous. So here it is, you can see that corner that I was mentioning. This is what we sort of started with, death by asphalt parking lot. Here's that corner that everyone had to make, and this is what it looked like. So we had to start, and this is one of the things politically. We somehow conned Barry Diller into rethinking how to build a campus and to start with the microorganisms that are there already. So soil, 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 especially when you have a place that wasn't dirt to begin with, that had been filled in with garbage. And then how do you build a landscape that's going to be successful on crap? And so what we did was we had soil scientists, and I don't know how we conned them into doing this, but we literally scavenged the entire site to find the right microorganisms that we could then think about and grow these things. So the mycorrhizals, and literally we found the tiniest patch in the one spot where no one would ever thought they would be. We harvested them, and then here's our gym, and then inoculated the soil that was coming in. And we did that because these microorganisms have been adapted to this unique spot in Seattle. And so the importance of that is that then they could then multiply over the years that we're building this thing and doing piles like this, and that's sort of where you can see some of the microorganisms. And then we also con them into thinking about compost tea. So literally having on-site the ability to grow this tea that has the organisms in, so that you could then initiate new plantings utilizing this inoculated water. And, you know, sometimes you have to go out on a limb, right? You don't know if it's going to work. You know, we find this tiny microorganism and thing, and you're basing your entire 48-acre site on this. You're like, well, that's okay. And so we did it. And this is what happened. Everybody was blown away. Literally, the plants were so happy that we had no weeds, because the weeds didn't have time to establish themselves. The animal life flocked to this thing immediately. And it gave us this really amazing opportunity to illustrate that if you take care of the soil, you can really make things happen. And for all you people that have big landscapes or whatever, when the soil's right, your maintenance goes down, because you aren't spending that time, you know, replanting or figuring things out, and it becomes this really lush land. This is, I'm not kidding, this is like 2 months in that have this immediately come. And then what it does is then this is that same corner you saw earlier with the asphalt, you know, thinking about the species, the nitrogen fixers, everything, really thinking in totality, what kind of plant materials can then reinvest into the land itself. But here's that corner. It used to be out there. Now we have this gracious curving separated edge for people to bike and walk and not kill each other. And the richness of the space. And we also layered in elements of found objects. We're really into finding things and how you repurpose them. This is Discovery Bay, just north of where they are. This notion of, when you think about Pacific Northwest, the driftwood, all these kinds of things are really, it's a language. You think immediately of that area. these booms, we literally, again, foraged around the place and discovered one of the ports farther south were using these giant logs, that's why they have holes in them, as booms to scrape trash off the skimmit off the top of the port water. And so we said, and they're getting rid of them, and we're like, well, we'll take them. And so these 40-ton logs got floated over to our site, and then we lifted them up with a crane and then created this habitat and language that starts to talk about the industrial edge of Seattle and orienting your view to Mount Rainier, but also as they degrade further, the habitat for insects is just mind-blowing. And that, again, reinforces the whole ecologies of a place and creates a better, healthier system. But the poetry of using elements that are from a place to describe a place and to reinforce a place, because these things could have gone and you would have never been able to use them. I mean, they would, I don't know, paper pulp, not even that to do it. But again, creating these environments that this happens. These are not photoshopped. That big old owl came in, and there you see Mount Rainier behind. The coyotes that come in, which is really great. So if you have any rat problems, yeah, they're really great because that's what coyotes eat. They do not eat people. They don't do anything. They eat rats. So they love people because we collect rats. But we also brought in a beekeeper, again, to work off the kind of plantings that we had created across campus to create this amazing sort of environment for both people and animals at the same time. And for the students out there, like, okay, is it real or is it Memorex? Of course, you probably don't even know what that means. But that is a rendering there, and then that is the construction there. So you can see like how important drawing things out, figuring out the grades and figuring out the moons and the spaces, and what the ultimate thing is they're almost spot on. So it's pretty interesting. This is the renderings we created of the whole campus. They added that curved building. The other buildings were existing, but there was a large site. And that middle section there's a lot of Southeast Asians work at Expedia, and they love cricket. And so thank goodness I'm a Kiwi and I know what cricket is. And so we sized that whole thing for an oval so they can play a full game. It also is for music festivals. So this is sort of the thing you entered in at the top there. And so what we did was, because it was Mr. Diller, you had to sort of almost have a theatrical approach to how you do things. So the idea was like, there's the train tracks. Remember the ones that used to be in the water? They're in land. This is where Boeing sends all their planes down. So it's really sort of eerie. Sometimes you'll see a giant fuselage move down towards Renton. So we had the idea that you could jump the tracks. And so the entrance would be through these series of green veils, which is abstracting the native northwestern landscape in a theatrical way. So you drive through these lines of cedars and pines. And then in between are dogwoods and more interesting woodland species. And then you arrive at this grid of an orchard, which is again about this. But in this case, we picked Katsura trees because Katsura trees, when they hit a certain point in the fall, smell like cotton candy. So the entire space before you enter in the building, you're having this sort of smell of the place. And then that big white, blue thing you see there, I'll get into a little moment, but remember that as you bridge over to the front door and you can see the point and everything. But this is how we broke it down to a series of different kinds of spaces around the property. Here's the first. So there's a green veils. You can see that is not a rendering. That's actually live. But you can see the detail we tried to get into, get those woodland spaces right. But we did in the rows so that they knew it wasn't planted. It was not like a fake. We didn't fake a forest, but we used elements of the forest so that you really could, and this is the experience. And within that, these are all the repurposed train lines, tracks. They become the edges of our paving. And then the ombre pattern you see there is really about it's local stone, but we wanted, it has silver in it, and there's iron in it. That's why it's sort of orange. And it does it in effect as an ombre. So it starts off dark and then light as you come to the front door. And that's the abstraction of the shimmering effect of the sound of Seattle on the ground plane. So we wanted people to get excited before they even saw the view with the paving. And as you come through, here's the paving going through, again, using different materials that are more eco-friendly. This is the katsura trees, and then the bridge over to the front door, and then across the bridge. And this is the water feature. I'll get into this a little bit. And to the end, which is where the cricket oval is. And you can see the repurposed train lines, and then it opens up to the view of the sound. The sound is a very important thing because it's right in front of us. It's everything about this place. So we really wanted to capture the beauty of the sound and introduce you not only through the pavement, but through an idea of a water feature. So what we did, which is crazy with technology now, is we digitally mapped a piece of the sound, then created a digital file, and then created these stone pieces, which is an abstraction of that water. And you're like, hold on a second. Why would you do all this stuff? Well, there's a couple reasons. If you're a landscape architect, this will hit true. You ever design a water feature? You have to design a water feature turned off, because ultimately the water feature will be turned off and turned into some sad planter or some whatever, and someone giving some crazy ass reason. It's not appropriate to use water here because we're water conscious and blah, 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 which is all true in certain points. But we're in Seattle where it rains every day. And so for us, it was creating these textures and elements that could work with either rain coming down or harvesting rain. So the entire water feature, there's a large cistern. It's completely fed by rainwater. And so there's no potable water or anything in. It's collected. And so whether it's turned on or off, it doesn't matter for us. But literally, we did these topography maps and created these models to illustrate what we were trying to do. And here is it actually happening. The technology we have now is really interesting. So as it cuts, this is the actual stone. To create the abstraction of the water, so when there's no water, it looks like water, but there's not. And so all these panels were cut. They're all unique to themselves. And we placed them in the water feature. We weren't so crazy, we wanted the whole water feature to do that, but where people were, we wanted them to have that engagement with the waters, the abstracted water edge. And in other places, we used, again, a roughened surface to create the shimmering effect. Because what's so beautiful about the sound is it shimmers. And then you also hear it. So when you have water running over a rough material, you hear the audio of it. So it's almost like white noise. And so the idea is by the moment you arrive on the site and you've gone through these things, you're decompressing. You're leaving the home behind and enjoying about what you're going to do. A lot of what we worked with was, I'm proud to say, the studies that were done here at Stanford University about the story, and you guys all know it, I'm sure, but I'm going to recount it for those who don't, is basically they did a study here where they took half a class and they made them walk through the Arboretum before they came to class. The other half did their drive-in and go right into the door. And they measured all of their brains on what happened. And for landscape architects, this was genius, because basically when they were engaged with nature, this stimulates the brain, their capacity, and the actual productivity. So they were getting like 20 to 30% better brains in there. So when you talk to a corporate head and you tell them, we can help you with your productivity by just getting people out into nature and moving meeting rooms, not in building, but actually out in the landscape. So, but you got to make it interesting. So here's the water cascading over the water feature. Here's the rushing section of it as it moves through. It's simple earthwork. Again, we try and work with everything that's on site, so there was extra dirt, so we created this earth form and allowed just gravity. So it just sheet flows right after that. And there's the cotton candy trees as you come through. And then a more simple ground plane, so you read the shadows of what they cast. Sustainability was huge on the site. I won't get this geek out too much on this stuff, but literally all the water and recycled materials were incorporated into the stormwater runoff and treatment systems. This is one that we keep trying to teach people. Rain gardens or stormwater treatment management does not have to look like an engineer did it. You can have a plant diversity. Even in the courtyards we created these wheels that allowed the chairman to actually understand that the color of the planting changes per season. And so as you see here, you know, when certain flowers and plant material that we have is going to be working together, and when you get the high color in the summer or the spring, and then how it lays out and planned. But this is a rain garden, you know, and it really is this notion that we can push beyond the engineers and think about the beauty of what they could be. And it's doing exactly the same job as you've probably seen them around San Francisco. They sort of have some junkus sitting in there trying to think that it's doing something. But these are the courtyards. Looking at contrast of one being more flowerful, one more grass forward. Again, pulling people out from their desk and into these series of oval links so they can do their meetings, moving around the oval 5 times, and maybe they'll get off the hook or whatever they're doing. But really immersing oneself in green. The fragrance and the movement of these large grasses and flowers that you discover every time are changing because the seasonality is changing at the same time. Become really important. So you can have these little moments literally on the side, on the other windows. There are, you know, thousands of screens. The one interesting thing was there's another landscape architect, Robert Marassi, who's up in Seattle. He's a big stone guy. He had done the Amgen campus, and the client wanted all the stone he put in out, and we're just, you can't do that. So we repurposed it everywhere. But these guys were so heavy, they would have had to blasted them out. So we said, no, please let us keep them. So that's an homage to him. It was lovely. That's one of the meeting rooms we created. We worked with Adel and Darling, the people that did Windhoven. We worked with them a lot. And so we brought them in on this project because they thought they could do a really beautiful meeting room. So that's a green roof. So literally the stormwater meadows go up and then over the roof, and then you have the meetings below. And then again, leftover earth, we created the knot, we call them. So this handles all 5,000 employees for outdoor day things. But it's always interesting because you're thinking about what's next door. This is another hot political. So sometimes, like Robert Marassi, you have to deal with, you know, serious landscape architects that when they did something, it was a different time. And sometimes things change and uses change. So Smith Plaza was literally a new heart for the University of New Mexico. And this was the original design, which is a Garrett Ekbo design. They sort of built it. They built all the hardscape, but didn't plant any of the trees. So yeah, which you'd imagine they would, looking at this beautiful thing. But that's what it was. You can see that only the trees in the corner got in, so all the rest of them created this bleak, modernist, beautiful, if you squint, place. But it was a huge impairment for ADA. So there was literally no way to get from one campus to the other without going up these massive flights of stairs, or block buildings, or what is really interesting about this campus, and I'm sure you guys have the same here, but when you're a small campus in the middle of the country, you really have to fight for students, right? And their niche was they were really into disabled students. So students that couldn't see or had problems with mobility, all these things. And then you put them in this sort of plaza and they would literally travel, and they knew, because they all think without, the senses that we're using, they'd come here and they would literally start crying because they didn't know where to go. There was nothing that you could pick up and no direction you could really go without hitting these walls. And so we got there with our ethos, and we really had to think, Garrett X was a hero of mine. Like, what, where do you start? And so we started by pulling back time and the mountains that are right there in front of Albuquerque, and the washes that we wrote. So pull back time, we realized that a wash is like a waterway, used to run right through this area and right in front of this amazing library, the Zimmerman Library. And so we started to think about how to think about what naturally was here, and then to respect and honor these sort of structures and forms that they did. And we did sketches like this, which obviously don't look anything that's modernist. But those abstractions of natural forms and creating places for people to sit and perch. And then we started, enough smoking that peyote. We sort of got more simple, but really pinching the space and using literally, this is our version of what it looked like. So taking that and really, we repurposed the brick. So that was really important for us. But then created these edges that you could sit and occupy and look down and see people, because voyeurism is always central to everything. It's funny walking with Kathy today through some of these parks that were buildings, and they're all down. And so literally that they're so popular because these edges of, just like here, but here we created those washes and then totally incorporated this, the roots. So you could never go from North Campus to South Campus, so now you can. And we greened it up, and we honored and respected the Zimmerman libraries and other ones, but really tried to engage with the space. And of course, you have these diagrams, which is the fire truck has to go through. And then also like event space and tents and stuff. So, really working with the university to, and their student population to create this. So gone are the crazy stairs, and in are the sort of gentle ramps and forms of the reused paving. Now what you're looking at here is a central walkway. So this is really critical for the vision impaired. So the texture of that dark thing you see right there, which is an abstraction of the water that would run through the wash, is literally allowing them to understand where they are and where to go. So going from one side of the campus to the other, or this offshoot that goes to the student hangout place, but creating these perches for people to sort of hang in and occupy is really sort of critical in the success of this. And it's funny, when you design something like this, how many people will follow a line? And so everyone started following the line along the way. So it's really funny, even the skateboarders, because skateboarders were the main deterrent in that whole plaza. And we said, well, they still have a home here, but they have a more confined home. But they do sit here and they perch. Before the trees could grow up and be all shaded, we created these umbrellas out of metal. In New Mexico, they have a tradition of tin punching to create lights, so we abstracted those. And there's the repurposed brick again. And yeah, I mean, it's really hilarious. People just sort of follow that line. And we kept the trees as much as, where we could. And again, people love sitting there just watching each other, which is really sort of fun compared to the other plaza. It's the same furniture you got in your cool pop-up landscape over here. And then here you can see that's the new accessible trail all the way up. Now that's all grown in, but you can start to see the juxtaposition of what we're trying to do to the natural mountain range, which you do see when here. So it feels more about the place than it's something that was an abstraction of, you know, pure architecture. Oh, here's so you can see some of the tin stuff. And then the turrets, which the skateboarders love as well. And this is the unexpected. So we came back, and now they have these massive events here where they party with headphones on, and they basically party, you know, they all hearing the music, but you can't hear it. And they light it up and all this other fun stuff. So again, things you don't think people would do with your spaces, but they do. This is where that Thrasher magazine is. This is this project. It's originally for the Uber headquarters in San Francisco. And this is what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to do the fire lane with the striping, with the bollards, with everything. And we just cannot bring ourselves to not challenge this way of thinking. And so we talked with the fire department. We talked with just everyone we could to think about, do we really have to do this? Do we have to create environments like this? And we'd rather walk through this. This is Nelken, Pina Bausch. And so we're like, why can't we walk through this and not that? So we brought, so this is our interpretation. So this is a fully functioning fire lane. All the emergency vehicles can go through here. We literally thought about how edging and material changes could do it. This completely, all the stormwater management is all integrated into this. And we created this sort of complete opposite approach to what the city and other places in Mission Bay were doing, which is the usual street tree thing. And we were like, no, we need something that's different, that speaks to a place. The elements you see here are abstractions, the seawall, because this was the seawall used to run through here. But thinking about planting and experiences and how you touch things. So you'll see some of those boulder pieces are polished and others are rough. So you get these different kind of lighting effect and elements where people are waiting for their Uber or the train, that it's about theater. And then working with, again, the materiality of the place that automatically slows and defies the elements that would normally move through here. And this is a stormwater. So that's what your stormwater could look like, except for the art piece, which is sort of great. And then this is that entire street that you would have normally have seen. And this is 3rd Street. Okay, Mission Bay. So this is one of those projects where, thank goodness I was young-ish to start. This project is right in front of the Warriors. So this is before the Warriors Stadium was even built. We had this commission. It took almost 15 years to build. Not only thinking about the various characters at the city that we had to perform for, but also BCDC and the Port of San Francisco. And the Port of San Francisco, as I mentioned, really loves historic asphalt. In this place, they love flat. They wanted flat grass and maybe a tree. And our client, which is the Mission Bay Development Corporation, who has to deliver all the parks in Mission Bay, said no way. And so luckily we were there to help create, I always have to say tenacity or hook or by crook when you're doing landscapes for the public. The interesting thing about this is we do a lot of residential landscapes, like high-end residential wineries. You can see a lot of our stuff. Mandavi just got a SurfaceDesign remake over. And so when we bring these large projects, we are bringing that sort of tactility or the residential character or design to a big public space, because usually big public space is so hard to build and no one just everyone throws their hands up and just does the basics, right? Whatever the saying, grass or whatever. Unfortunately for the port, we are not that skilled. So this is the park itself. It's a 7-acre park. You can see the new Warriors Stadium. And I'll get into some of the craziness that got into this thing. But we started with a model of topography. So they literally wanted to throw this in the bin because they wanted flat. And we created down 16th and the other street, I've forgotten what it is. That's where you have straight views to the ocean and it's flat. So we were able to con them into creating the topography for people to sit and occupy and enjoy. This is the site itself. Its history was crazy. This is what it was when we first came on. Terry Francois literally cut through the park, and they then organized it straight to create the land itself. There was a lot of surcharging that went on the site, and then you can see why. That's our site out there in the bay. So as it started up and slowly in 1852, we would have to swim for our park. But you can see over the time how it's filled in. And so when it got to this edge piece, then it started getting incorporated. And now you see 2015, which we came out of this. But what's interesting is the industrial edge. So this was the train tracks. All the steel that made the Bay Bridge was launched from here. So it's sort of interesting, this train track right here. And so this was the site. It was pretty crappy. And this was, you know, what Port's version of what the BCDC wanted, which is the Bay Trail right there, that little asphalt thing. So we said, well, we can do a little bit better than that. And you can, yeah, I mean, it was pretty much, and this was the road running through the park before it was straightened out. And then the glorious days. Here, you know, like, this was huge for us because we had spent like, I don't know, 10 years of our lives at this point just to get these shovels out for these people. And then another 5 years and COVID and everything else that went on. But literally we, again, created these topography, reinforced these connections to the dry docks, to the big views, and back to the skyline of San Francisco. And these, again, these through places that were flat, and created this sort of topography that you see here. This is a rendering. So let's see how close we actually got. The renderings here, we created these series of boat slip gardens that orient your eye to downtown San Francisco, but they're made of the same materials of the ships that were being built. And we incorporated these wood planks. So there's the dry docks and the boats on the other side. So this is sort of what it started as. But as I was telling the students, I'm sort of a black sheep in my family. They're all structural, seismic, civil engineers. And I'm like an architect, landscape architect. I'm like, but at least for all the engineers that I get to work with, I'm either their curse or their blessing because I can speak their language. And so the biggest effort that we try to do and why we're trying to introduce topography to this place is sea level rise. So the current level of what they had, the seawall, was not going to meet sea level rise. So we wanted to layer in and get accessibility working, stormwater treatment working, all within this pancake that basically was not dirt. So in an earthquake, it's like jello. So the liquefaction sort of moves. And even in areas around Mission Bay, it can drop like 20 inches, excuse me, which for ADA is a huge thing. Yeah, it probably is 20 feet. So what we had to do is to really think about using our engineering hats. How do you build on top of that jello and not allow the jello to function as the park? And so what we did was we worked with the idea of lightweight foam because we do a lot of parks on top of towers around the world. And so we use that technology here to create the layer of what you needed for soil and then foam, structural foam that doesn't have any impact. and the layering of the subbase to create a lightweight, to get our topography and allow the land to do what it needs to do. So like, talk about Legos. So this was a lot of fun. We started off with preloading the site with a bunch of dirt, and then that was moved, and then we started this sort of cake of foam. As you layer it up along the ag base, sort of created like all of a sudden we're in some episode of Superman, going out here. And slowly as we built up, the foam is then covered with liner. So this allows water to percolate through the entire form. So you're giving the water back to the water table. So there's certain things that we really wanted to achieve and have no impact on the land. So here you see it here. It's just like one of those models you make for all the students out there. That's, there's your model. It's just one-to-one. And then you start this process of covering it with the soil and bringing the right soil in. So here we are with the soil. And then there's the finished product. So that is not a rendering. That is the actual thing. So it's sized because we did have to capitulate a little flat area in the front for soccer field if they wanted one. And then the diagonal takes your eye right out to the chips. And then the promontory point gives you the full view and the height of the East Bay. I always love this sort of ode to sports fields over here. The port, in theory, is going to put a restaurant there. And so they didn't want us to do anything, so they were just going to put asphalt, their favorite asphalt. And we're going to say, hell no, we're going to at least break out some paint, and we're going to paint your asphalt. And so we painted the asphalt, and they got really mad at us because we painted a basketball court on it. And they said, well, if you paint a basketball court, one, the Warrior is going to take over and use it, and we're never going to get our thing back. Or the kids are going to love it too much, and we'll never get our restaurant site. Of course, we just found out from the economics people is they can't make a restaurant work here. But there you go. Well, right now, this is the best place to go for roller disco. People, again, you don't know what they're going to do, but people love it. They put their boombox in, and they literally skate around all these forms. This is the topography of the land that we incorporated in. And the other component that really brought us home for this is the Bay Bridge steel. So the second phase of the Bay Bridge, was torn down. So literally, we won a competition to use some of that steel. So we literally went out on the bridge as they were decommissioning it here and picked the pieces of steel that we wanted to use or reuse in the park. And so it's sort of crazy. You can see you can just fall off into the bay. But this is the steel we collected. And so it was taken and cleaned of all the paint and everything, and then it sat so we could sort of cure the steel to make sure that it was this lovely color, the rust color, and then it's sealed. And by the way, if you ever want to, those are perfect things for deterring skaters or outside neighbors on sleeping on your thing. But here they are repurposed, the vertical elements, and they become shade structures. The overlook we created, again, we could not go over the water because of the BCDC, so we went right to the edge with these elements. And again, for people to sit and enjoy the place and connect to the place. So it's really interesting to see, we literally even picked the lighting that you can see there that was an abstraction of the cranes. So really blurring the landscape of the industrial port and bringing it on our sites. We're not losing that character of the place, as you see here. Again, those connections. Planting as well. Again, we geek out on plants. I know we're landscape architects, but we love plants. This in particular, the Dudleyias here, they're found on the coastal California cliffs with no water. So we literally planted them with no water. And they're growing like crazy. And then what you see there is a coastal shrub. So there's a line from the water's edge. We did California coastal. Then we went to an oak savanna. And then along the street, it's much more playful gardening. So this is the oak, the coastal planting afterwards as it's filled in. And you can start to see the repurposed steel. And then the overlook, these are the gardens. So there's a lot of beautiful sort of California wildflower natives. This is the oak savanna. The grasses, again, are fitting for what you discover there. And then this element here. So this was really important for us to get, again, as I said, you transition from these various heights with sea level rise. So we didn't want it abrupt. And so we created this sort of boardwalk element that's all ADA accessible. You get up to the top and you have a totally different view of things. It feels like you're on a ship. We used wood. And on the front side is the Bay Trail and a big area for you to sit. So you can pause or play or whatever on the structure. At the top, you can see this is it from above. There's the shade cloths with the repurposed steel. Yeah, here's my favorite. I can't believe it. They actually did make us repaint the basketball court out. But these are those gardens. Again, the native California grasses, and you can work your way through here. And here's the same people, but instead of with a shovel, they've got their little snip out, which politics is always the main thing. But I like to think about the beauty that you're creating and beyond the politics and not force, but really listen to a place. I mean, you have to listen. We don't listen anymore. And so as designers, we have to listen not only for a client, but for the culture of a place, for the soil that you're growing in, the plant material, and the animal life that this is covered in butterflies now. So thank you on this thing. Somehow I made it to where they wanted me to be. There's room enough for a few questions if you'd like. There's 5 minutes. Yes.
You've won a lot of amazing commissions. Does the phone ring and a commission comes in, or are you participating in competitions, or are there requests for proposals?
A lot of it's all over the map. We do less competitions. We do get invited. This was, I always laugh. Sometimes the Oedipus theory happens, like you kill your father. Expedia was a Pete Walker with my boss's project, and then that didn't happen. This one was a George Hargreaves project, which didn't happen. The HOK guy didn't. So it's sort of funny how people know you're like a little small fry, and sometimes those being nice and listening to people and having these relationships, they remember, so they call you back and say, hey, like the Expedia one was a mini competition with Catherine Gustafson and this fancy woman from the East Coast that Mr. Diller uses on his East Hampton houses. And so it can be a combination of that. We really do go for a lot of RFPs. Architects, we love working with architects. So we work a lot with Adlin Darling and with SEB and Henny Larsen is a really amazing Danish architect right now we're working with. So you can have a relationship and then they just, hey, I got another one. Or, oh, this is a weird one, so we're gonna call James. You know, hard project. We usually work on very difficult, hard projects because we're the ones that can deliver when it looks like you're not gonna get delivered on. So even though we're working with Foster right now on and that was another one that just recently happened. They said, oh no, this is too hard. Call James. So that's how it usually happens. But a lot of it's word of mouth. We always laugh because we're sort of low and under the radar. We're just slightly maybe coming above the fray with the bigger boys. So but we sort of pride ourselves on being that way. We're not, as you saw, hopefully, there's no project that looks like another one of our projects. And it's not a signature, because I work for the signature people. And I don't think the way our world is and the importance of being from or coming from a place for design warrants that kind of signature quality. So the stories all come from the place, and it's us teasing it out. But it's not just us, it's the community. Well, I mean, I could have shown you the thousands of pictures with all the Post-its all over the place, and the ones that we also engage with as well. Yeah. Uh-huh. Oh, that's good. Well, congratulations. You picked the right profession. I'll tell you that much. You aren't going to make any money, as they always tell you. It's not totally true, but it's true. But it's about passion. So passion is one of the biggest responses to it you're asking. Because when you're passionate about something, you really figure out what the solution is or where a direction could go. And that excitement or curiosity of investigation bleeds into your client. And those clients find you. Like right now we're doing the guy that owns WhatsApp's house, and it's like, okay, I don't, this is what it could be. And, he's from Southeast Asia, and it's like, yeah, I want to know your culture. I want to know where you're from. I want to understand what's your aesthetic or what it is. And then we'll tune a design to that. But we're bringing them along with a vision. All these projects have to have a vision. And they also have to have a champion that is not you necessarily all the time. Characters like Kathy here, who take these projects and make them behind the scenes, that do negotiate, with the dog walk. Well, we deal with the dog walkers and the bike people and all those kinds of people. But they're doing with sort of the politics, and where the money is coming from. We're great for trotting us out and, here's this idea for Tunnel Top, and we talked to Nancy Bechtel, and we raised $33 million on our little master plan for Tunnel Top. But Jim Corner built our design, but that's it's fine. We're happy about that because our vision carried on. He took the mantle and made it better, so you'll see in the design community, especially in landscape architecture, we know everybody. Everyone knows each other. Everyone's done. And so you really want to, it's like a family. And so you're happy. I am ecstatic when I lose a project to Andrea Cochran or, other characters. Sometimes I get mad with Scape, but whatever. I go back to New York. But anyway, but no, I'm just joking. But you are, because there are really good designers in the field that we are part of. We're leading the effort where architects used to lead, to create open space and places where people actually want to be, and not in this death by asphalt, concrete sort of world, which even they are moving across. Now they talk about sustainability and different materials, which is great. More the merrier. As long as we're all working towards a positive environment that is not only for us, but for everyone else and the birds and the bees and everything. Because it's actually our legacy. And if you build something, it's even, I tell this about people too, because we do a lot of work around the world, like Mexico and New Zealand and blah, blah, blah. Again, low and under the radar, but the first thing we try and do is, besides after listening, is to understand the capabilities of the people that can build. There's nothing worse than detailing the crap out of something and the person looks at it and I don't even know how to do this. So we literally do go and talk to the makers, the builders, and say, you know, in Hawaii, you can't do concrete. They cannot pour concrete worth a beam. So anything you do concrete, you have to do a stone veneer on it for it to work. So that's a sort of funny thing until they get real concrete masters, which they're not. So we have to design something with that in mind. And so part of that, I call it tenacity, or is to think and work with what's there, and then you elevate it. And you are elevating things that people are already used to, but don't know how special they are because they see it every day. And so that's why we challenge engineers and getting rid of fire curbs. And they're there and they're delineated and meets all their boxes, but it doesn't, we don't have to have this homogeneous environment that we have created. You know, even here, all these amazing little bike roundabouts I saw today. Awesome. Like, great. You solved the problem, but you did it smart, right? And, you know, maybe it wasn't right the first time, but you keep iterating and you get there. And that's what I think most people are afraid to fail. And failing is a good thing because you learn from failure and you learn from prototypes and you learn from things. And so you don't have to like get all tight and get it perfect the first time. It's better not to be that, because on these kind of projects that last like 15 years, you have to be going around and around and around and around. Like that Bayfront Park, it was stopped in the middle because of an FBI investigation, because the head of public works, which forced us to use a contractor A in the port, basically, you know, forced us to do it, and we kept saying no. This is no, 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 until they said you have to use them, and then the FBI swooped in and it closed the entire project down, and now he's in prison. So, you know, you can't plan for that. You don't plan for that. I mean, I'm not going to plan for that. But you know, but you can plan for other things and be smart about things. And again, the word is listen. That's really the big thing, to listen. So did I answer your question, or was that too weird? Okay, so do you have to go? Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you.